This past Tuesday, I drove to Hibbing for what I expected to be a 15 or 20-minute errand. I had 2 appointments scheduled later in the day, but I figured I had a long enough window to fit in this errand. I've come to experience in life, now I routinely say, if you have a roof, you'll have leaks. If you have a microphone, you'll have sound issues. If you have a spouse, kids, or any human relationship, you'll surely have communication issues. Finally, if you have stuff, it breaks. Well, one of my phones was really acting up. I had dropped it, and the screen was all cracked, and it needed replacement. And so I figured I would quick run over to Hibbing, replace it, get back to Chisholm in about an hour, with some time to spare. Well, that didn't happen. Instead, I experienced purgatory. I arrived at the AT&T store at 2:15 p.m. Based on what I was looking for, they sent me over to Walmart. Figured I still had a good 45 minutes before this appointment. Go pick out a phone and head back. Well, that ended up not being the case. What was a quick errand turned into more than 4.5 hours. 2:30 p.m. to near 7:30 p.m. There I was at Walmart in the electronics department, stuck. I was stuck. Going through all the phone transfer business, many of us have experienced troubleshooting problem after problem after problem. And so what do we call this? Normal. The ordinary circumstances of life. It was nothing special. This is what I was experiencing. The ordinary circumstances of life that we all experience day after day. The question is, did I recognize God in those ordinary circumstances that afternoon? In this gospel, Jesus comes to his native place, a familiar place, a normal place, and they didn't recognize him. Meaning they didn't recognize God among them. He was too familiar to them. Is he not the carpenter, the son of Mary? Clearly, God could not be in their midst there, in the familiar and ordinary place of Nazareth. And there's a lesson here. God does not very often visit us in the unusual and spectacular, sort of sweeping us away or hitting us over the head. Rather, most often God visits us in the normal, the mundane, the ordinary circumstances of our own lives, and through the ordinary, normal people we're surrounded by. And so I pose this question. How has God visited you in the ordinary circumstances of your life this past week? Think of that question. How has God visited you in your life, normal life, in this past week? How would we answer that question? Could we answer that question? I don't know about you, but for me, that's a really tricky question. It's sort of kind of like I'm stumped. But when I look back this past Tuesday, God was there in my midst, in the electronic department of Walmart, of all places, in the inconvenience and frustration. That's right where God was. And believe me, it was a struggle for me, probably some of the people surrounding me. I had 2 scheduled appointments, important appointments, that I had to cancel. But God was there with me in the electronics department. Not just with me. I think those 2 workers, they spent 4+ hours helping me get that new phone. We might think, well, Father, that's their job. Well, their shift actually ended at 5 p.m. And they stayed there with me until 7:30 p.m. And it wasn't just me who had places to be. They had places to be. The one coworker had planned and wanted to be at home that evening, but had to stay with the manager until this job was complete. So to see this generosity, this sacrifice, this patience, and then the amount of people I saw and ran into. If you want to run into people, spend 4 hours at Walmart. But God was there. He was arranging these sort of meetings, people I was seeing. Are we able to recognize God in the most ordinary circumstances of our life? Whatever projects we're working on, we're probably all working on projects, and they come with hiccups and frustrations. Do we see God? It's hard, but that's where He is. I know myself, like the people in the gospel, it's very hard for me to see Jesus and God during these times. Also, we might even think, oh, how great it would have been to be alive 2,000 years ago during the lifetime of Jesus, to be able to see Him with our eyes, hear Him with our ears, to be able to walk with Him, His mighty deeds. Surely we would have believed then. It would have been so much easier. Really? Do we really think that it would be easier to recognize God then than now? His own relatives didn't recognize Him. And He was amazed at their lack of faith. So much so that He wasn't able to perform mighty deeds in their midst. So the challenge and lesson for us all is to recognize God today, among us today, wherever we are, whatever our circumstances. Even like me, the frustration of spending 4.5 hours at the electronic department in Walmart. That's where God was. For us to think in our own living room, in our own home, to be able to recognize God there.